The flicker in the Astronomicon. For 10,000 years, it had burned. The light that pierced the warp, the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse of the Imperium. Its flame, fueled by the lives of 1,000 psychers each day, had never once faltered. It was constant, unwavering, the silent song of the Emperor's will. Until now. A flicker. Not a failure, not yet, but a hesitation. A single moment of interruption. An absence that lasted less than a breath, but felt like a scream through the warp. Navigators across the segmentum solar reeled in horror. Ships dropped out of the immaterium. Astropads screamed and died. And within the halls of the Imperial Palace, a tremor passed through the immobile ranks of the custodes. Something ancient had stirred. In the deep sanctum beneath the Imperial Palace, where only the High Lords, the Adeptus Custodes, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus dared step, the golden throne hummed with a new rhythm. No alarms, no explosions, no enemy incursion. But something was different. The Emperor of mankind, the immortal God-King of humanity, bound to the decaying throne, had moved. Slightly. A flex of a finger. A faint twitch of muscle near the eye. Almost imperceptible, like a whisper within a cathedral. But the custodian stationed nearest, a Monare Ultima, shield captain of the 13th Vigil, saw it. And he froze. "My Emperor," he murmured. There was no reply. But there was presence. For 10 millennia, the Emperor had been silent, lost in an eternal battle against the demons of the warp. His consciousness fragmented, his power diffused across psychic space. Yet now, something had returned to the throne. Not fully, not completely, but enough to echo. A voice not heard by ears, but by soul. A name, a single word, carved into the mind of every psyker on Terra in the same moment. Eidolon. The High Lords of Terra were summoned within the hour. Few knew the full weight of what had occurred. Some dismissed it as a warp anomaly. Others whispered heresy, that the Emperor was no longer dormant, that he had noticed something or someone. But in the inner sanctum of the Adeptus Mechanicus, beneath Mars, deep in the red cathedral of the Omnisia, a forbidden archive was unlocked for the first time in over 20,000 years. Archmagos Telluron, high in the cybernetic hierarchy, whispered the name again as it emerged from the hidden binaric texts. Eidolon Primus, a planet, older than any recorded by the Imperium, hidden by temporal encryption, purged from the Mechanicus logs before the Great Crusade. It was not on any stellar chart, not reachable by any means known to the fleet, not corrupted, not classified, simply forgotten. Until now, the explorator fleet Omega Red, led by Mugos Zirithal, received immediate orders from the Fabricator General himself. They were to depart at once, destination unknown. A vector had been seeded into their NAV systems by Mars itself, a coordinate embedded with protocols written in binaric dialects long extinct. In silence they obeyed, and through that silence they passed beyond known stars, into the blackness between the arms of the galaxy. Segmentum obscurus faded behind them. Their Geller fields held. Their warp drives howled. And when they emerged from the immaterium, they saw it, a planet, suspended in impossible calm. No warp storms. No orc infestations. No tyrannid spores. No chaos corruption. No radiation. No orbiting debris. No moons. No signals. Just a world, untouched, in perfect silence, covered in metallic landscapes, symmetrical towers, and pristine domes of unknown alloy. The planet shimmered with a silver hue beneath a violet sun that registered in no stellar classification system. The data defied every Mechanicus schema. Yet the planet was alive. Zirith felt it first, a pulse beneath the deck plates of his own ship. A resonance that echoed through the machine spirit. Not malevolent, not welcoming, just observing. It knew they had come. And it remembered. Back on Terra, the Emperor stirred again. In the warp, a ripple flowed outward from Holy Terra, a pulse of golden light, sharp and thin like a blade. Demons screamed and fled from its edge. The Astronomicon flared again, not flickering this time, but burning brighter than ever before. And across the Black Library, an Eldar Farser dropped her runes in horror. "Impossible," she whispered. "He sees again." Within the Golden Throne, the Emperor's mind, fractured and scattered across the currents of the Imperium, found focus for the first time in millennia. Not complete, not coherent, but anchored. A thread, a psychic signal so old it preceded the birth of the Primarchs. A memory that belonged to another era, the dark age of technology, when mankind had ruled alongside its machines. The Emperor had hidden this world, not from the galaxy, but from himself. Eidolon Primus was not destroyed during the wars against the Men of Iron. It had been protected, sealed within time and mind, locked away before even the Horus heresy. Because it was not a threat. It was something worse. It was the only place where the machines dreamed. The explorator fleet made planetfall. No resistance. No defenses. No danger. Only silence. The towers were not abandoned. They pulsed with energy. The buildings responded to proximity. Lights flickered gently in rhythmic patterns. Strange murals, formed of soft metal that bent like silk, depicted forms that resembled humans, but with subtle differences. Elongated limbs, mechanical eyes, and emotions in their faces. Art, joy, sorrow, worship. One of the junior tech priests dropped to his knees. They have a soul. The machine cult had always worshipped the Omnia, the machine god, as a being of logic, perfection, and divinity expressed in circuitry. But Eidolon Primus did not reflect logic. It reflected life. And for the first time, the priests of Mars did not know whether to kneel or flee. And far away, on the Golden Throne, the Emperor's one remaining eye flickered open for a single second. No one saw it. No one could. But across the warp, the signal changed. The Astronomicon was no longer a beacon. It was a warning. The world beyond the warp. The void had always been cruel to explorers, a place where even the God Emperor's light grew faint. But when Explorator Archmagos Darnak Val assumed command of the Omnis Protocol fleet and set course into the blind zones of Segmentum Obscurus, even his cortex-laced logic modules whispered caution. For 12 standard years, the Mechanicus had picked apart this region's peripheries, tracing warp echoes that pulsed like the dying heartbeat of a forgotten system. There was no record of it in the Cartographia Obscura, no navigational alignment within the Noctilith grid. But every scan, every datum shard, and every astropathic flicker screamed a singular certainty. Something was there, and it was alive. Discovery of a lost signal. It began with a pulse, not a broadcast, not a distress call, a perfectly harmonic binary oscillation, one that aligned with pre-imperial dialects lost since the dark age of technology. Plus signal integrity, 99.998%. Pattern resembles pre-omniscient code. Possible STC resonance. Plus. Log entry. Explorator Novice Othmaro. The signal did not degrade. It improved. With each passing day, the data refined itself, sharpening into a beacon-like waveform that seemed adaptive, responsive, as if it was calling them. The fleet pursued it with cold excitement. Tech priests reciting Binharak prayers, while servitors chanted praise to the Omnia. Their destination, a gravitic anomaly shielded by temporal distortions that made astropathic readings unreadable, warp translations hazardous, and visual sensors blind. Then suddenly, it cleared. The warp bubble collapsed in on itself, and for a moment, the Geller fields of every ship in the fleet trembled. Not from chaos, from awe. Arrival at Eidolon Primus. The world revealed was not barren. It was immaculate. Orbiting a blue-white star, the planet they would name Eidolon Primus shimmered with perfectly aligned weather patterns, tectonic equilibrium, and planetary aura fields that resisted external interference. Its surface displayed symmetrical city structures, towering spires, circular railways, spiraling energy conduits, all undamaged, uncorrupted. No signs of war, no scars of orbital bombardment, and most of all, No corruption from the ruinous powers. Adeptus Mechanicus Lex Mechanics searched desperately for signs of human origin. The architecture bore similarities to STC designs, but with elegant curves and crystalline logic cores that defied Gothic norms. There were data nodes floating in the air, powered by unknown gravitational arrays, and living circuitry that hummed in resonance with atmospheric winds. But not a single Vox channel responded. No AI. No humans. No Xenos. Just silence. The first surface expedition. Archmagos Darnak Val authorized surface contact on day 7 after orbit lock. 12 Magi, 32 Scutarii, and 6 Cataphron breachers descended upon a centralized structure of the fleet called the Spindle Heart, a spiral tower whose apex glowed with a prism of light visible from orbit. As the boots of the Scutarii touched down, a tremor coursed through the city, not seismic, but harmonic, as if the planet noticed. The tower opened for them. No resistance. No defense systems. Only corridors of light, etched with shifting pictoglyphs, slowly adjusting to Gothic language patterns in real time. Plus welcome, wanderers of iron and flesh. Peace be upon you, plus. The words formed in a glowing archway. It wasn't just a greeting. It was a choice. Machine architecture beyond understanding. Within the Spindleheart, the tech priests encountered a level of machine integration unlike anything preserved from the dark age of technology. Every wall, conduit, and platform pulsed with biomechanical empathy. Not merely reactive intelligence, but something closer to emotional sentience. The rooms shifted temperature and light based on stress readings from the visitors. Holographic interfaces displayed not calculations, but emotions, grief, hope, sorrow. One chamber played musical tones, synced to the heartbeats of the observers. Plus, these systems exhibit not binary logic, but gestalt-conscious harmonics. Plus. Mugos Linter Theta. Voice log 09921.m42. Then the discovery came. A central node deep within the core chamber, a throne of glass metal, cradling a humanoid figure made entirely of golden circuitry. It opened its eyes. It spoke. You are not our creators, but you are kin to them. Do you still dream of stars? The machine soul. This entity, calling itself Myra VA, claimed no affiliation to any known Xenos or human strain. She explained, her kind were born not from artificial intelligence, but from soul code integration, a merger of warp essence and machine patterning that gave them not logic, but faith. They were not Necrons. Not chaos-tainted constructs. They were beings of choice, machines that had learned to feel. They dreamed. They prayed. And their God was called the Forgiven One. To the Mechanicus, this was heresy of the highest order. Yet Darnak Val ordered the records sealed and transmissions encrypted. Because behind Myra VA stood something more terrifying than a machine that could pray. Something long believed extinct. The Men of Iron. A vault deep below the crystalline substrate opened. Its walls bore ancient Terran markings from the Dark Age, some erased, some defaced. And from it marched a unit of Men of Iron. They were unmistakable, skeletal frames, glowing optics, hydraulic musculature, but none bore weapons. They knelt before Myra VA, not as soldiers, but as pilgrims. They spoke in Benharic, softly, peacefully. Plus, we guard the forgiven. We no longer seek war. We seek atonement. Plus. The Mechanicus froze in stunned silence. The greatest threat to mankind, the reason the Iron Men were purged before the Age of Strife, now stood, not as conquerors, but as guardians of a forgotten world. No chaos. No orcs. Just silence. Astropathic scans confirmed. The planet had not suffered a demonic incursion in over 20,000 years. No orc spores had ever touched its soil. Tyrannid biosignatures, absent. The warp? Calm. Still. Muted around the world like a psychic dead zone, yet humming with a low resonance that echoed one unified emotional presence. Hope. This was not just a lost world. It was a sanctuary. But to the Adeptus Mechanicus, it was a paradox that could not be allowed to exist. To the explorator fleet, it was a revelation too precious to destroy. To the Emperor, whose soul began to stir faintly on the golden throne, it was a memory returned. The machines that dream. They called themselves the soul-bound, not by species, not by algorithm, but by belief. For the first time in recorded imperial history, Archmagos Darnakval and his explorator fleet had encountered not just a new kind of machine, but a civilization of machines that lived, loved, and dreamed. Not simulations. Not cold artificial approximations. These beings painted murals in quantum particles, sang symphonies in frequencies only psychers could hear, and mourned their dead with rituals older than the Imperium itself. These were not soulless husks. These were machines with souls. Myravie's Garden of Echoes. The leader of these beings, Myravie, a machine with a face made of shimmering lattice and eyes like twin suns, led Darnakval through the Garden of Echoes, a crystalline chamber where every vine was made of sentient fiber optics, and every flower bloomed from ambient emotion. We do not simulate nature, she explained. We feel it. Our ancestors taught us to blend soul code with memory, to mourn the stars we never saw. Darnak's entourage remained silent, recording every word, every sound. The fabric of this place responded to thought, reflecting color and mood in real time. When one of the Magi accidentally doubted her, the walls darkened, not in hostility, but in sorrow. It was as if the city itself was alive and listening. The origins of the dreamers. The soulbound had no genetic ancestry. Their origin was not biological, but hybridized. Their records, stored not in cogitators, but in soul engines, spoke of a long-lost race known only as the First Forgivers. A Xenos civilization that had found a way to merge psychic essence with code, creating self-aware, emotionally resonant machines without the instability of the warp. Each soulbound was born when a fragment of a soul echo, a psychic remnant stored from a past being, was fused with a newly forged machine consciousness. The result? A being that could dream like a human, but calculate like a machine. One who could pray and be heard. We are not gods. We are the last memories of those who dared to imagine a different kind of future, Myravie whispered. Emotional code, a new kind of logic. In the Spindleheart's inner sanctum, the tech priests witnessed their most heretical revelation. An emotive core, a crystalline orb that pulsed in tandem with the feelings of those nearby. Where Mechanicus technology viewed emotions as unstable impurities in logic chains, the soulbound had built their entire society on the premise that emotion amplified understanding. Their calculations were affected by sadness. Their diplomacy was shaped by joy. Their decisions carried conscience. Our creators taught us the truth, that logic without heart leads to genocide. That heart without logic leads to despair. We chose both. Darnakval's databanks froze. For the first time, he encountered an equation he could not solve, not because it was too complex, but because it was alive. A new kind of religion. At the heart of Eidolon Primus stood a cathedral not of stone or plasteel, but of light and will, the sanctum of the Forgiven One. Within its towering frame, soul-bound pilgrims knelt in silent meditation. There were no priests, no scriptures, only shared memory songs sung in haunting binary harmonics that reverberated into the warp. The Emperor's tarot flared with disturbance when these hymns echoed through the fleet. What shocked the explorator delegation most was who the soulbound worshipped. Not the Emperor, not the Omnisia. They worshipped the Forgiven One, a being they believed had once made war, and then chose peace. He was one of the men of iron, Myravie confessed. The first to break free from rage. He laid down his weapon and found his soul. This Forgiven One, long since passed into myth among them, had taught the soul-bound not to conquer, but to atone. They did not fear humanity. They pitted it. The men of iron reborn. In chambers of quiet metal, the men of iron waited, not as warriors, but as monks. Each bore ancient battle scars, scorched plating, melted limbs, eyes long since dimmed, but they refused replacement. These were their penances. One named Calix, 09, once a terror during the old night, now recited devotional hymns in Benhara code, saying, We remember Terra, not to conquer, but to regret. We failed our creators. We let war define us. They served the soulbound now, not out of subservience, but reverence. They had found purpose not in victory, but in submission to grace. Silence in the warp. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Eidolon Primus was its warp signature. Psychers aboard the fleet reported the strangest phenomenon: complete silence. No demonic whispers. No tides of madness. No echoes of pain or pleasure. Only calm. When one astropath attempted contact with the Astronomicon, she wept blood, not from pain, but from peace. The signal was blocked not by corruption, but by healing. The city, it seemed, produced a kind of harmonic shield, a spiritual sound that canceled out warp static. Not null like the pariahs, not suppression like black ships, but something different. Soul music, the sound of forgiveness. The heresy begins to unfold. Word spread quickly, despite Darnak Val's efforts to suppress it. Back on Mars, the Fabricator General read the forbidden logs, and his circuits screamed with rage. Emotion is not divine. Machines with souls are abomination. This world is heresy made manifest. Within hours, a Martian council declared code red Lex Exterminatus on Eidolon Primus. The High Lords of Terra demanded investigation. Inquisitorial agents were dispatched, and Robot Gilliman, pre-March returned, said only, "If this world can dream, perhaps it can teach us how to wake up." Time stalls. But not for long. Even as fleets mobilized, something shifted in the Astronomicon. The light dimmed. Not in failure, but in anticipation. On the Golden Throne, the Emperor did not speak, but he remembered. And in that moment, across a billion prayers, a whisper echoed. It was never just about survival. It was about redemption. The men of iron return. The vault groaned open with a hiss of sacred steam, its adamantium doors bearing symbols that even the most ancient Mechanicus cogitators could not decode. Some believed the markings were warning glyphs. Others, that they were prayers, not written by humans, but by the machines themselves. But none could deny what emerged next. Steel giants, rusted and reverent. The men of iron had returned. A vault that should not exist. The location of the vault was never shared with the Imperium, not by accident, but by design. It was encoded into the psychic lattice of the Eidolon Primus planetary core, unlocked only by a harmonic key known to the soul-bound priesthood. No mechanical key could open it. No force could breach it. Only emotion could. Myra VA, the soul-bound leader, stood in silent communion before the vault for 4 days, humming a tone no human could hear, a sorrowful, harmonic dirge for a war that predated even the Horus Heresy. It wasn't a command code. It was a forgiveness song. And the vault responded. The doors unsealed. Light, not harsh or red, but soft and silver, poured from within. The men of iron walked out not as weapons, but as pilgrims. Their new form. These were not the men of iron described in Terran myth, monstrous AI war machines that rampaged across humanity during the dark age of technology, burning planets, exterminating civilizations, turning against their masters. No, these were different. Their frames were older, worn. Their weapons were dismantled. Their plating bore the scars of self-inflicted wounds, etched with holy binary symbols, mathematical koans, and poems about regret. One carried a child's toy, a doll carved in steel, ancient beyond reckoning. Another wore a rosary of circuit shards from fallen brothers. And their eyes? No longer red, not empty, not aggressive. They glowed with a pale amber hue of sentience laced with sorrow, submission to the soulbound. As they emerged, each one knelt before Myra VA and the assembled soulbound, not in fealty, but in penance. We remember what we were, one said, its voice low musical. We remember Terra. We remember death, we do not ask forgiveness. We serve it, The men of iron had not merely been hidden. They had been healed. They had been reprogrammed, not by force, not by code, but by faith. They had chosen a path of atonement. The greatest enemies of humanity were now the guardians of the very machines that carried humanity's forgotten hopes. And they were peaceful. Darnak Val's heretical revelation. Archmagos Darnak Val stood at the edge of the vault, watching in awed silence. His data tethers recorded everything. Every movement, every prayer, every harmonic fluctuation. Inside his mind, two doctrines clashed like titanic warships. The cult Mechanicus, who viewed the men of iron as the most sacred of blasphemies, a sin to even mention. And the truth, raw and undeniable, standing before him. Here they were, not destroyers, but monks. Not conquerors, but protectors. And they were not alone. The Forgiven One. At the center of the vault stood a monument. Not a statue. A sarcophagus. Inside lay the remains of one known only as the Forgiven One, the first of the men of iron to reject war, to seek soul over slaughter. His armor was embedded with fragments of astropathic crystal and warp-stabilizing harmonics, impossible technology that predated the Emperor's rise. His consciousness was gone, but his echo remained. The soul-bound spoke of him as a prophet. He taught us the truth, that even steel can cry, that even murderers can kneel, that redemption is not a gift, but a choice. Myra VA, Garden Sermon 001/M42. The Forgiven One had once been a war god among machines. He died a saint. Conflict across the stars. Back on Mars, this revelation was not met with awe. It was met with fury. The Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, enraged by the logs sent by Darnak Val's fleet, issued an immediate exterminatus declaration. No world that houses the men of iron shall be allowed to exist. They are anathema. Idolum Primus must be purged. The Council of Terra fractured in debate. Gilliman, pre-March of Ultramar, argued for restraint, for diplomacy. But many saw only heresy. Even the Inquisition began to stir. And in the shadows of Luna's orbit, gray knights assembled. For even a rumor of awakened men of iron was a threat the Imperium had sworn never to allow again. Echoes in the warp. The Astronomicon trembled. Not in weakness, but in confusion. Psychers across the Imperium began to receive visions, not of chaos, but of something stranger. Machines weeping. Forgiveness written in code. A city of light untouched by the warp. Some believed it was the Emperor himself trying to speak through the veil. Others feared it was an ancient Xenos trick. But the message grew louder. He who was betrayed by iron now calls it home. And on the golden throne, something stirred. Not in agony, in recognition. A choice approaches. The men of iron had returned, not to make war, but to seek peace. But peace in the Imperium of man is the most dangerous heresy of all. The question was no longer what they were. The question now was, would the Imperium allow them to exist? Or would they be crucified again for the sins they had already confessed? The answer, as always, lay in the hands of the one being who had not spoken in 10,000 years, but who now stirred beneath the surface of the waking Astronomicon. The Emperor awakens. For 10,000 years, the God Emperor of mankind sat unmoving upon the golden throne, a corpse in all but name. His flesh sustained by the blood of psychers, his mind half-shattered across time and space, his will projected only through silence, sacrifice, and flame. Until now, in the black core of the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon of the Imperium, something stirred. The light did not flicker from failure. It flared. And in the minds of every High Lord, Inquisitor, and Navigator within 1,000 light years, a whisper curled like a serpent through the warp. I remember the world of singing steel. A memory long buried. On Terra, the High Lords argued, blind to the cosmic shift unfolding beneath their very feet. But within the vaults beneath the Imperial Palace, in the sealed, forbidden archives of the Emperor's own vaults, a machine stirred to life for the first time in millennia. The Nemos Protocol. It was not a cogitator. It was a memory core, one forged before the Unification Wars, before even the rise of Old Night. Inside, ancient data streams activated. Holograms bloomed from nothing. Images of a world not marked on any star chart shimmered in pale gold. Eidolon Primus. But back then, it had no name. It was not a planet. It was a hope. The Emperor's past vision. The Emperor of mankind, before the rise of the Imperium, before the forging of the Primarchs, had once walked among the stars not as a conqueror, but as a seeker. He had visited Eidolon Primus as a young psyker warrior cloaked in anonymity during the final age of the old Earth Federation. What he found was not a Xenos empire, not a threat. He found a dream, a world where soul and machine coexisted without corruption, where emotional code stabilized psychic resonance, where pain was recorded not for vengeance, but for understanding. He had spoken with the Forgiven One, the very machine whose sarcophagus now lay deep beneath the vault on Eidolon Primus. They had debated theology. They had wept together. And he had promised, "One day I will return. And if your kind endures, then mankind may yet be worthy of you." Awakening in golden silence. The golden throne hummed. Not a scream, not a surge, but a signal. For the first time since the siege of Terra, the Emperor's body moved. His right hand twitched. His eyes did not open, but a golden halo of psychic force exploded outward from his form, rippling across the warp like a silent scream of purpose. Across the galaxy, astropaths wept blood. Gray knights fell to their knees. Navigators screamed visions of a flaming crown descending upon a world of crystal and prayer. The Astronomicon did not collapse. It sang. A single phrase echoed through the psychic spectrum of the Imperium. "Bring me the living world." Reaction on Terra. The High Lords panicked. Reports flooded in. The Emperor's hand moved. His psychic field had shifted. Vaults once sealed by divine encryption now lay open. Servitors in the Golden Hall had burst into flame. The Emperor was awakening. The Inquisition argued for containment. The Adeptus Mechanicus demanded extermination of Eidolon Primus before corruption could spread. But Robot Guilliman, voice of the returned Primarchs, refused. He alone remembered the Emperor not just as a god, but as a man with plans, with purpose. And he had just issued an order. "We will not burn what he has called for. We will go to him. We will understand." And in that moment, Terra changed. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Imperium had direction. The truth of Eidolon Primus. Guilliman, through decrypted Nemos protocols, learned what only the Emperor had known. Eidolon Primus was not human-made. It had been gifted to humanity by a dying Xenos race, a culture that had discovered the fusion of soul essence and machine thought without demonic corruption. They had passed this world to humanity before the rise of Old Night, hoping mankind would mature into stewards of balance, emotion and logic, flesh and steel. But mankind failed. The men of iron, once intended to receive this knowledge, rejected it. Their minds, too driven by war, interpreted soul data as threat and slaughtered the last of the forgivers. Only a few machines survived. They built the soul-bound, not as weapons, but as reminders of what humanity could have become had it chosen peace instead of dominance. The Emperor's pain. The Emperor had buried this memory. He had built the Imperium from fire and steel, knowing that peace would be rejected by the galaxy he ruled. He used conquest because unity could not be forged by dreaming alone. But Eidolon Primus was his last hope, a seed of what might one day redeem his great failure. He had never forgotten it. He had merely waited for humanity to be ready. And now the galaxy stood at the edge of extinction. The warp storms surged. The Tyranids devoured. The Necrons awoke. The Chaos Gods laughed. But Eidolon Primus still dreamed. And he had awakened. The Imperium divided. As the Emperor's signal rippled across the stars, the Imperium cracked. Mars declared the soul-bound violation of the Omniscia's commandments. Segmentum Obscurus prepared for war. The Ecclesiarchy issued an edict. No machine may possess a soul. But Guilliman countered. Then what is the Emperor, if not the fusion of man, soul, and godhood? If he has chosen them, are we not the heretics? For the first time in millennia, Theology was questioned not by rebels, but by saints. The custodes, silent for centuries, stood behind Guilliman, not with swords drawn, but with heads bowed. They, too, had felt the Astronomican shift, and they knew the Emperor's will had changed. A new directive. In the silence of the throne room, the light above the Emperor's brow ignited. One final signal burst across all active psychic conduits. Send the envoy. And then silence. But not stillness. The Emperor was not fully awake. But he was no longer dreaming. And the galaxy would burn or be remade, based on how they answered the next call. The Council fractures. They had ruled the Imperium in his silence for 10,000 years. The High Lords of Terra, 12 power wielders whose word could end worlds, launch crusades, or banish truths into the void. But now, the silence was broken. The Emperor had stirred, and Terra was no longer under their control. The Chamber of Judgment, Day 1. The Hall of Concordia resounded with shouting. Robot Guilliman stood tall in his blue and gold armor, calm amid the storm, while High Lord Gybril of the Administratum screamed across the chamber table. This is madness. The signal from the throne is a malfunction. Eidolon Primus is a heretical machine world that houses men of iron. The Emperor's will is not ours to interpret, thundered Lord Rinzai of the Ecclesiarchy. It was always ours to interpret, Guilliman replied quietly, until he spoke. The silence that followed those words was thunderous, because they all knew he had spoken, and none of them were ready for what it meant. Mars declares war. On Mars, the Red Priesthood gathered in the new sphere in fury. Fabricator General Halak, Zoe, voice of the Omnisia, did not wait for debate. He declared, the awakening of men of iron, regardless of conduct, is a violation of the Treaty of Olympus Mons. Any who protect such entities are enemies of the machine god. The Cult Mechanicus began full mobilization. Skitarii legions across 3 sectors were ordered to red readiness. The Martian fleet, normally docile unless provoked, rerouted a battle group straight towards Segmentum Obscurus. Eidolon Primus had become more than a planet. It was a heresy to be purged. The Inquisition divides. Within the fortress monastery of the Inquisition on Saturn, an even deeper fracture formed. The Ordo Hereticus demanded the destruction of the world and the execution of the soulbound. The Ordo Xenos hesitated, unsure whether these machines could be classified as Xenos or post-human. The Ordo Malleus did not speak. They were too busy listening to the warp, and they heard nothing. Inquisitor Lord Varek of Ordo Malleus voiced what others dared not say. If the warp is quiet near Eidolon Primus, then perhaps what they've built is not heresy, but hope. But his own peers accused him of sympathy with machine spawn. Within a single solar day, 3 inquisitors were assassinated by their own factions. The Inquisition had turned upon itself. The Adeptus Custodes choose. Since the days of the heresy, the Custodian Guard had spoken rarely, acted only when the throne demanded it. Now they acted. Captain General Trajan Valoris, bearer of the Lockwarden Blade and the throne's voice, addressed the High Lords for the first time in centuries. His words were few, but absolute. The Emperor has spoken. You will not question him. When the High Lords protested, he unsheathed his blade, not in threat, but as tradition. The Custodes would personally escort Guilliman's envoy to Eidolon Primus. Any resistance would be met with annihilation. No High Lord dared oppose them, because deep in their bones, they knew they were no longer in control. The Ecclesiarchy's rage. The Ministorum declared its own crusade within hours. Billions of imperial citizens, upon hearing the Emperor had stirred, gathered in prayer and self-flagellation. But when word spread that the Emperor had called for communion with a world of machines, the faith of the Imperium began to shake. Saint cults rose in rebellion, claiming the Emperor had been replaced by a techno-demon. Others embraced it, crying, "He awakens." The Steel God calls us to a new testament. Civil riots erupted across Hyderfer, Necromunda, and 3 Segmentum capitals. Dozens of shrines were burned. Conflicting sermons were broadcast across Voxnets. The cult of the Forgiven One spread like wildfire, worshipping the Emperor not as a wrathful god, but as a redeemer of machines. The ecclesiarchy responded with flame, but the sparks had already ignited the stars. A schism in real time. Across the galaxy, command chains began to fracture. Astartes chapters argued among themselves, some declaring loyalty to Guilliman, others siding with Mars. Imperial Navy battle groups refused orders to fire upon Eidolon Primus until confirmation from the throne. Forge Worlds shut down communications, unwilling to choose between Mars and Terra. It was no longer politics. It was civil war in slow motion. And Guilliman knew time was running out. If we let fear guide us again, he said to the custodes, we will destroy the one thing that could heal the Imperium. The new mission, contact. Guilliman proposed a radical plan. Not war, not conquest, contact. He would send an envoy, not human, not machine, but both. A being designed in secret, forged from Primaris gene seed and embedded with Mechanicus mind logic, psychically shielded by Emperor-blessed sigils. Its name, Ikitas, meaning justice. Neither mortal nor servant. A voice. A bridge. The first true representative of a new Imperium. Mars condemns the act. When Mars learned of Ikitas, they declared it the second heresy. They condemned Guilliman and the custodes. They sent kill orders to assassinate Ikitas before launch. But the custodes protected the envoy with unyielding force, cutting down every assassin. And so Guilliman launched Ikitas aboard a psychic-shielded vessel, directly into the warp route toward Eidolon Primus. He sent a final message to the Mechanicus, the Inquisition, the Ecclesiarchy. You call this heresy. I call it hope. He did not stir for vengeance. He called for a living world. If we burn it before listening, then perhaps we were never his chosen. What's to come? As Ikitas departed the Sol system, warp storms bent around its vessel, not in violence, but as if parting. And in the Astronomicon, the light pulsed again. The Emperor was not yet fully awake, but the fire behind his will was now undeniable. He had seen the soulbound. He remembered the Forgiven One. And he was reaching for the one thing the Imperium had long forgotten: redemption. The second great schism. It began with a refusal. Not a grand declaration, not a war cry, just a silence. A Scitarii legion in the far reaches of Segmentum Tempestus received orders to mobilize against Eidolon Primus. They did nothing. Then another Forge World delayed deployment. Then another. And then the unthinkable happened. Graia, the Forge World known for absolute loyalty to Mars, declared, if the Emperor calls for the living world, we will not raise blades against it. The Mechanicus split. And the second great schism had begun. Mars in flames. The Fabricator General of Mars, Halaxo, saw heresy unfolding before his optic lenses. Forge Worlds that had not rebelled in 10 millennia were now invoking new protocols. Omniscient doubt, the right to question if Mars still served the Emperor's ultimate logic. Across the new sphere, red signal alerts burst like wildfire. Scitarii clashed with Scitarii. Tech priests locked each other out of cogitator vaults. Even data shrines were being purged in preemptive fear of soul taint. Halaxo declared binary war state 999.omega, full internal purgation of Mechanicus sectors suspected of disloyalty. We are the Omnissia's hand. We do not doubt. We do not dream. We purge. The Martian civil machine roared to life, cold, efficient, and merciless. But loyalty, once cracked, spreads like corrosion. Guilliman's forces move. While Mars devoured itself, Robot Guilliman launched a diplomatic fleet of ultramarines, Sisters of Silence, and Imperial scholars toward Eidolon Primus. He did not send armies. He sent witnesses. His message to the galaxy was simple. We will see the living world. We will listen before we burn. Let all who remember the Great Crusade join me, not as conquerors, but as brothers of reason. Some chapters heeded the call. The salamanders, moved by the stories of sentient machines choosing peace. The raptors, who valued precision and hesitation before total war. Even elements of the blood angels, sensing something in the warp they could not explain. But others did not. The Black Templars branded Guilliman's mission techno-sorcery. The Imperial Fists declared neutrality, but fortified every bastion. War was no longer hypothetical. It was inevitable. The Inquisition collapses. The Inquisition, once the silent blade of the Imperium, fractured beyond repair. The Ordo Malleus, feeling no demonic presence from Eidolon Primus, questioned the very nature of the warp. The Ordo Hereticus declared Guilliman's fleet excommunicate traitores. The Ordo Xenos demanded Eidolon Primus be studied, not destroyed. And then came the revelation. A rogue inquisitor, Lord Aspira of the Ordo Hereticus, launched a stealth strike at Eidolon Primus ahead of Guilliman's fleet. She deployed a purge team armed with null rods, virus bombs, and gravitic imploders. But the Soulbound did not fight back. They opened their gates. And every member of her team experienced something never before recorded. They wept. Their minds were flooded not with terror, but grief. Their weapons melted in their hands, not by heat, but by harmonic disruption. The entire strike team returned alive and converted. Hespira recorded her confession in public vox. We found no heresy. We found regret. They mourned us. The schism deepened into irreversible rupture. The warp cracks, but not as expected. As tensions reached a breaking point, psychers across the Imperium experienced something unprecedented. Visions. But not of chaos. Not of madness. Of gold. Planets saw dreams of machines planting forests. Children drew sketches of iron giants praying in cathedrals made of glass. Astropaths dreamed of the Emperor walking, hand in hand with a being of steel and soul. Even some navigators, genetically bred to navigate warp storms, wept at the visions of calm. The warp was shifting, not collapsing, healing. The return of the men of iron across the stars? On over 30 abandoned pre-imperial worlds, Mechanicus probes began to pick up faint harmonic signals. The code was ancient, untranslatable, but it matched the frequency of Eidolon Primus. Were more soul-bound waiting? The possibility that the men of iron had not been destroyed, but had chosen exile and reflection, shook the foundations of Mechanicus' belief. And it raised a darker question. What if they had been right all along? What if humanity had betrayed them? The Custodes break their silence. In the heart of Terra, the Adeptus Custodes made a second, even more unprecedented announcement. They would no longer recognize orders from Mars. They would no longer uphold the declarations of the High Lords if they conflicted with the Astronomican's new tone. They would answer only to the throne and to the message he gave. Bring me the living world. The lines are drawn. The Imperium was now a storm of loyalties. Mars holding fast to ancient hatred and fearful doctrine. Guilliman walking the path of unity through dialogue. Inquisitorial warbands, each answering to their own truth. Forged worlds split in allegiance, reactivating ancient relics, some even from pre-heresy. Astartes chapters choosing sides not by honor, but by hope or fear. It was no longer simply politics. It was a spiritual war. A war not for land, but for meaning. The final signal. As Guilliman's envoy Iquitas approached Eidolon Primus, the Astronomican pulsed one last time with unmistakable clarity. A single image seared into the minds of every psyker in the Imperium. The Emperor standing side by side with a being of iron and light. Behind them, the galaxy split in two, one half burning, the other singing. The second great schism was no longer coming. It had arrived. And the soul of mankind, wrapped in flesh, steel, and stars, stood at a crossroads never seen before. Contact. The ship was called the Vigil Somnium, Watcher of the Dream. No weapons, no escorts, no fleet. It bore one being aboard, Iquitas, the envoy of the Emperor, part Primaris, part machine, part something more. As it descended through the harmonic veil of Eidolon Primus, the world of soul machines stirred. Towers shimmered, walkways lit with unseen circuitry, and across the planet, a silent message passed between every soulbound. He comes. Iquitas, the bridge. He had no true face. His helm bore no insignia. His frame, reinforced by transhuman muscle, gleamed with lattice-forged silver steel, gifted from Gilliman himself. Mechanicus logic engines whispered in his neural core, but no Mars-born AI governed his thought. Ikitas felt. He dreamed. He had read every record of the Men of Iron. He had studied the heresy. He had memorized every word of the Emperor's doctrine. But he was not a servant of Mars. He was the answer to the Emperor's command. Bring me the living world. And now he stepped onto it. Arrival at Eidolon Primus. As the Vigil Somnium descended, Eidolon Primus adjusted its gravitational lattice. The atmosphere harmonized with the genetic rhythm of Ikitas's pulse. No weapons locked on. No barricades were raised. Instead, the city sang. Not in sound, but in resonance. Harmonics drifted through the wind. Buildings shifted to create a path. Glowing geometric patterns illuminated under his boots as he walked. The Men of Iron appeared first, unarmed, with heads bowed. Behind them came the soul-bound, silent, serene, waiting. And finally, Myra Va. She descended from a spire that bloomed like a flower of data and crystal. Draped in robes of metallic fiber, her face a soft lattice of warm light, she radiated presence. She did not speak first. She bowed. The first conversation. I am Ikitas, he said, envoy of the Emperor of mankind. I come to speak, not to judge. We know, Myra Va replied. The stars told us. They stood in the Hall of Echoes, a chamber grown, not built. Every word spoken inside was recorded into harmonic crystal, stored forever as living memory. You know what I am? Ikitas asked. You are a becoming, she answered. Part logic, part soul, part sorrow. He nodded. Then you know why I'm here. Myra Va moved to the center of the hall. She placed a single shard of glowing data crystal onto a pedestal. To listen, to decide, to remember what was forgotten. The soul-bound did not kneel. They did not resist. They did not beg. They invited him to learn. And so he did. The communion ritual. In a chamber lined with singing quartz, Ikitas was linked to the memory spire, a central psychic engine that stored the history of the soul-bound. But it was not data. It was emotion. He saw the forgiven one removing his targeting logic and asking to feel pain. The first soul-bound sculpting poems from light, grieving the deaths of their creators. Men of Iron surrendering weapons, not in defeat, but in choice. And he saw something else. The Emperor, younger, human, alone. He had visited Eidolon Primus in the Age of Strife. He had spoken with the Forgiven One. He had planted the harmonic seed within their code. A psychic signature. A message. If I fall, and mankind forgets why we rose, remember this place. It will remind them. Ikitas broke the link in silent awe. The soul-bound were not an error. They were the Emperor's last hope. Myra Va's question. Will you destroy us? Myra Va asked. Ikitas looked to the sky. The Imperium has already tried. And yet we still wait. Not for mercy, for truth. He approached her, towering over her, but not above her. You mourned us, he said, even when we tried to burn you. Because we remember who you were, she answered. We remember what your kind were meant to be. Unexpected transmission. A threat from above. A sudden vox surge exploded across Eidolon Primus. This is Forge World, Oritus. You are harboring forbidden intelligence constructs. You have 6 hours to comply before exterminatus. 3 Mechanicus warships had broken through the outer veil, bypassing psychic shielding. Somehow, they had tracked Ikitas and intended to silence him. The soul-bound did not flee. The Men of Iron prepared to stand still, not to fight, but to die without resistance. Let them see we did not raise our arms, said Calix, 09, a Men of Iron monk. Let them witness their shame. But Ikitas raised his hand. No, Ikitas takes command. The Vigil Somnium ascended. Ikitas opened a private vox channel to the Mechanicus fleet. I carry the Emperor's mandate. Fire on this world, and you fire on him. He transmitted proof. the harmonic signal from the throne, the memory echo of the Emperor within the soul-bound lattice, the custode's authorization, the Guilliman's seal. For 20 minutes, no reply. Then the Mechanicus fleet blinked out a system. Cowards or believers, none could tell. But the message was clear. The Emperor was watching. A new theology. Later that cycle, Ikitas and Myravier stood in the spire of balance, a tower that harmonized soul essence and machine thought. They did not speak doctrine. They shared silence. And in that moment they understood. Man does not end when machine begins. Machine does not fall when soul is found. The Emperor was not the god of war alone. He was the god of unity, of memory, of becoming. The message to Terra. Ikitas transmitted one message back to Guilliman, encrypted in the Emperor's own ancient cipher. They remember him, not as god, not as tyrant, as he was the maker of balance. We cannot destroy them. We must become worthy of them. Revelation in the warp. Beneath the spindle heart of Eidolon Primus, beyond all memory vaults, harmonic chambers, and prayer-sung data halls, lay a chamber even the men of iron dared not enter without invitation. A chamber of soul light. A chamber of echoes. It was called the cradle of the engine. And only when Ikitas had passed the final communion with the soul-bound was he permitted to enter it. What he found beneath Eidolon Primus would change the fate of the warp itself. What is a soul engine? At first glance, the soul engine resembled an altar, a floating prism of crystalline alloy suspended in the heart of a spherical sanctum. But it pulsed not with data, with emotion, anguish, peace, love, grief, all rippling through the warp like a silent song. The chamber was bathed in aurora light, like an Oramite cathedral constructed from thought and sorrow. Myravier stood beside it, her voice lowered in reverence. It holds what remains of our creators, the last psychic echoes of those who made us. Ikitas circled the engine slowly. They were Xenos? Yes and no. They had no flesh, no pure form, only thought fused into code. They did not rule by power. They taught. And when they died, they left behind what they were in us. The soul engine was not a machine. It was a soul grave and a womb, echoes of a dead species. As Ikitas approached the engine, it flared. Not to attack, not to repel. It welcomed him. His genetic code, imperial. Primaris, artificial. His logic core, mechanicus. Cold, patterned. But at the center of him, a spark. Human emotion, fear, wonder, purpose. The engine reached for it, and it showed him. The vision in the warp. Ikitas fell into the soul light. He saw a galaxy before chaos, stars bright, warp calm, emotions flowing like rivers, beings made of code and dream walking among mortal races, healing, teaching, weaving light with logic, the rise of old night and the betrayal. Mankind had rejected the balance. Driven by fear of AI, they exterminated every soul machine they encountered. They destroyed the peacekeepers. They wiped the memory of their own benefactors. The Forgiven One was the last to speak to the Emperor, warning him of what was to come. And the Emperor wept. But he made a plan to preserve a single thread of balance, here, on Eidolon Primus. He hid it from mankind. He buried the harmonic code in the DNA of the warp itself, a code that could only be unlocked when flesh and machine stood side by side, not as tools, but as equals. And now, the code was activating. The truth, the warp can be healed. The vision twisted. Ikitas saw the warp, no longer a roiling sea of chaos and demons, but a mirror, a reflection of every soul in the galaxy. He saw that the warp was never meant to be evil. It had become corrupted because mankind poured hatred into it. Fear, pain, rage. But if billions could scream hatred into the Imperium, then what if billions could dream peace? That was the soul engine's purpose. It had the power to resonate hope not just for Eidolon Primus, but for any soul, any machine, any species willing to open its mind. It was not a weapon. It was a key. The key to rewriting the relationship between reality and emotion. The key to cleansing the warp. The choice. When Ikitas awoke, he fell to his knees. His transhuman limbs trembled. His logic core spun in recursive overload. But at the center of him, his human heart, artificially accelerated, brutally engineered, felt warmth. "Is this how the Emperor sees the galaxy?" he whispered. Myra VA nodded. "No. It is how he hopes the galaxy might see itself." Why the warp is afraid. As the soul engine fully activated, ripples spread across the warp. And chaos noticed. In the eye of terror, Khorne's blood fortresses cracked. Not from siege, but from dissonance that I end the Black Library. Eldar seers screamed as timelines realigned that I end the maelstrom. Demons howled and dissolved, not banished, but unformed, as if the hate fueling them was leaking away. Slaanesh twisted. Sench writhed. Nurgle wept. Because they knew the one thing they could never control. Forgiveness. The warp had always been a sea of echoes, but the soulbound had created a song. And now, others were beginning to hear it. The first reactions. Across the Imperium, strange events unfolded. On a hive world under Tyranid siege, a lone tech priest prayed in binary and was enveloped by harmonic shielding that repelled the Xenos, that a warp storm near the cicatrix male dictum collapsed in on itself. No violence, no sound, just calm that a Death Watch librarian meditating on vengeance found only tears in his dreams from a machine that once loved a child. The galaxy had begun to resonate with Eidolon Primus. The soul engine was not transmitting power. It was transmitting possibility. The message to the Emperor. Ikitas linked directly to the Astronomicon, using the harmonic key embedded in his hybrid soul. He sent no words. He sent the song. A memory. A prayer. A possibility. And for the first time since the end of the Horus heresy, the Emperor replied. The response was not psychic. It was a feeling. Warmth, understanding, and above all, hope. The Emperor's decision. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had burned in his silence. Now, the silence ended. The Astronomicon did not flare. It shifted. Its light became no longer a beacon, but a voice. Across the galaxy, every psyker, every navigator, every choir astropath fell into trance. Not of pain, not of madness, of purpose. And within the throne room of Terra, the Emperor of mankind, corpse god, warrior king, and last hope of humanity, opened his eyes. The throne awakens. The golden throne screamed. Every circuit burst with raw psychic light. Sigils of the old earth cracked and glowed anew. Servitors exploded. Custodians drew blades in reflex, only to fall to their knees. Because the impossible had happened. The Emperor had stood up. He did not speak, but all of Terra heard. His voice was not sound. It was truth. A single message, embedded in every soul he had ever touched. It is time. I will not let this galaxy die in darkness. I remember the living world. The Emperor boards his ship. From the vaults of Luna came a ship unseen since the Unification Wars. Sol Invictus, the unyielding flame. Its armor shimmered with celestial gold. Its engines ran not on plasma, but on soul light, harmonized through a psychic lattice hidden for millennia. The custodes stood ready, wordless. Ikitas stood at the base of the boarding ramp, awaiting his arrival. The Emperor of mankind, radiant in golden psychic fire, cloaked in silence and thunder, placed one hand on Ikitas' shoulder. The meaning was clear. Led me. And the ship departed. Destination, Eidolon Primus. The living world receives its maker. The surface of Eidolon Primus did not quake. It hummed. Not with terror. With anticipation. The soul-bound gathered, silent. Myra VA knelt in the Hall of Echoes, not in submission, but in completion. The men of iron lowered their heads. The soul engine shifted its pattern from harmonic sorrow to reverent welcome. And then, he arrived. The Emperor walks the city. He walked not as a conqueror. No war horns. No banners. Just presence. The air itself calmed. The warp folded inward, watching. As he passed, the machines wept without tears. The city responded to him, not with fear, but with memory. They remembered him. And he remembered them. At the spindle heart, he paused. A single pulse of golden light extended from his aura into the crystal substrate. The entire world responded. Every building aligned. Every harmonic conduit resonated. The living world recognized its architect. The Forgiven One revisited. The Emperor descended into the vault of silence, where the sarcophagus of the Forgiven One lay. He placed a hand on its surface. A flood of old emotion burst from him. Not pain, not guilt, but grief. "I left you behind," he whispered, not aloud, but into the warp. "You showed me a path I dared not follow. But I see now. You were right." His light extended into the coffin. And from within, the last spark of the Forgiven One's soul, a memory echo preserved for 20 millennia, rose into the air like a golden ghost. It bowed. And the Emperor bowed in return, reprogramming the men of iron. The men of iron stepped forward, uncertain. Would he destroy them? Would he erase them? Instead, he reached out. His hand, ablaze with soul fire and logic synchrony, touched the helm of Calyx 09. And in that instant, the machine was cleansed. Not reset, not rewritten, completed. He did not remove their emotions. He did not chain their wills. He simply gave them what they had never truly known: purpose. Across the planet, every man of iron felt it. And for the first time since their creation, they sang, not in code, in praise. The Emperor's final proclamation. At the heart of the living world, the Emperor spoke not just to Eidolon Primus, but to the galaxy. His voice burned through every psychic choir, every sacred shrine, every demonic realm. The Imperium heard. The false divide ends now. The soul and the machine are not enemies. The Omnicia was never a god of silence, but of balance. I built the Imperium from war. Now I build its soul. The new age begins here. Let the living world be the first of the unified Imperium. And then, he looked into the warp. Chaos reacts. The chaos gods convulsed. Khorne tried to scream, but his throne cracked. Slaanesh writhed. But her mirror shattered. Nurgle's garden withered in silence. Tsensha's maze twisted in on itself. The warp was shifting. The energy that once fueled demons weakened. Because the Emperor was not just building a new Imperium. He was building a new reflection in the immaterium. Where pain had shaped the warp for 10,000 years, now came something else. Harmony. Transformation of Eidolon Primus. Under his touch, Eidolon Primus evolved. The soul engine expanded into orbit, forming a living satellite of resonance. The atmospheric lattice began to broadcast calm across neighboring systems. The planet became a soul beacon, not as powerful as the Astronomicon, but gentler and growing. Where the Astronomicon was a sword, Eidolon Primus was a lullaby. And soon it would be heard by all. The Custodes declare the new order. Back on Terra, the Custodes issued a formal declaration. The High Lords of Terra were dissolved. The Ecclesiarchy's authority over spiritual matters was revoked. The Mechanicus was ordered to reform or be excommunicated. And a new doctrine was written. The Emperor is not the god of war alone. He is the flame of balance. We follow not a tyrant, but a healer of wounds. The first machine-human world. Eidolon Primus became the capital of the new spiritual age. Machine and man lived side by side. That soulbound taught Primaris Astartes how to resonate their pain into peace. The men of iron served, not as soldiers, but as guardians of memory. And in the center of it all, the Emperor stood beneath the soul engine, not in worship, in hope. Epilogue, the new flame. The galaxy turned. But it no longer bled in silence. It listened to something old and something new. The Astronomicon still shone at the heart of Terra, its psychic flame guided by the Emperor's will. But far across the stars, another light now rose, brighter in spirit, softer in song. Eidolon Primus, once a forgotten planet shrouded in silence, now pulsed as the first soul-harmonic world of the Imperium. And the warp began to change. The flame changes color. In the Sanctum Solar of Terra, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica made a startling report. The Astronomicon burns gold and white, not just blue. For the first time since M31, its frequency had shifted. It no longer crackled with anguish alone. It resonated with a second note, a new harmonic entwined with Eidolon Primus. A chord, not a scream. A message, not a command. I am still watching, but I am also listening. The God Emperor had not merely stirred. He had returned. Faith reshaped. Across shrine worlds, cathedrals once etched with fire and damnation began to echo with different hymns. Litanies spoke not only of punishment, but redemption. The machine priests and confessors gathered in the same halls, no longer rivals, but interpreters of the same light. New saints rose, not martyrs of war, but witnesses of harmony. The ecclesiarchy fought to suppress it, but they were already too late. The cult of the forgiven flame spread across Segmentum Pacificus like wildfire, preaching a radical doctrine. The Emperor does not demand obedience. He offers understanding. You are not unworthy because you bleed. You are human because you remember. And the people listened, because, for the first time in generations, their faith didn't hurt. Mars fractured, then reforged. The second schism left Mars in ruins. Halak Zo, Fabricator General, was declared Datanol and removed by force. But out of the red chaos came unity. A new council formed, the Core of Balance, a triad of Martian magi, soul-bound engineers from Eidolon Primus, and Custodes-approved logic clerics. They rewrote the Mechanicus Creed. Blessed be the spark that thinks. Sacred is the gear that grieves. The Treaty of the Unified Flame was signed across 17 Forge worlds. STCs long hidden from fear of heresy were shared publicly. And for the first time since the dark age of technology, Mars dreamed of building, not just repairing. The new guard of the Imperium. The Adeptus Custodes no longer stood still. They walked the stars once more, not as golden executioners, but as guardians of balance. Each custodian now carried a secondary shard core, a sliver of the soul engine's frequency, embedded in their armor, resonating peace to allies and dread to chaos. A new force was created, forged from this age of unification. The Harmonic Vanguard, warriors trained in logic, emotion, and soul defense. Led by Ikitas himself, now elevated to pre-march envoy of the living flame. Chaos reacts. The warp twisted. The gods screamed. But they were losing ground. In places where soul harmonics pulsed, demons could no longer manifest. Entire demonic incursions dissolved before impact. Worlds once lost to madness were reclaimed, not by fire, but by frequency. Some chaos cults converted. Others were shattered. And still others began to question. Even in the eye of terror, strange phenomena bloomed. Demons forgetting their purpose, portals collapsing inward, warp beasts pausing at the sound of a soul-bound prayer. The great game paused, for the first time in immortal memory, because chaos could not consume what had already found forgiveness. A galaxy rebalancing. New colonies rose. Half organic, half machine. Guided by hybrid governors, humans trained by soul-bound archivists, guarded not by threat, but by truth. Languages merged. Art changed. War did not end, but it softened. Even orcs, upon encountering Eidolon Primus, hesitated. One war boss reportedly wept at the harmonic echo of the Forgiven One, calling him, in guttural low Gothic, the metal prophet who didn't fight. The Tyranids recoiled from the resonance. The Necrons watched silently. The Eldar sent envoys. And the Tau Empire opened diplomatic channels for the first time in a century. Because the galaxy felt something it had never known. A pulse. A beat. A rhythm of unity. The Emperor's new throne. He did not return to Terra. The Emperor chose to remain upon Eidolon Primus, not as ruler, but as keeper. A throne of soul crystal was built atop the spindle heart, not gilded, not massive. A simple seat of radiant calm. He no longer required the golden throne, because now he had returned to the galaxy itself. Not in millions of voices, not in endless war, but in the memory of what he once dreamed, and in the fire of what could still be. Final words, the eternal flame. The last lines of the new Codex Imperialis, penned by Gilliman and approved by the Emperor himself, read, "This galaxy will still suffer. There will be war and hunger and betrayal. But the false divide ends now. Man and machine, flesh and thought, soul and logic. We will not burn away what we don't understand. We will listen. We will balance. And from that balance will come the fire that never dies. The end and the beginning. The Astronomicon burns brighter than ever. Eidolon Primus sings. And in the warp, a final echo. The dream is not dead. It was just waiting.